In Oslo, Norway, a moment unfolded recently in 2025 that has stirred the conscience of the world and redefined the very narrative of peace. Within the restrained elegance of the Nobel Institute, the Norwegian Nobel Committee gathered to announce its shortlist for this year's Peace Prize. The room was thick with anticipation as pens hovered over notepads, cameras clicked, and diplomats exchanged whispers that carried the weight of history. Then came the name that set the world alight: Ibrahim Traore, the interim president of Burkina Faso. This nomination was no ordinary announcement. It was a spark that illuminated deep questions about leadership, legitimacy, and the meaning of peace in our fractured century. At just 36 years old, Traore represented something radically different from the traditional faces of diplomacy. He was not molded in the corridors of Ivy League universities or the cloisters of global summits, but in the unforgiving soil of his homeland. A soldier who sees power in a coup, yes, but also a farmer's son who spoke of peace not as rhetoric, but as work, tangible, hard, collective work. The sound of his name, uttered in Oslo in 2025, rippled from the dusty streets of Ouagadougou to the embassies of Paris and Washington, demanding that the world re-examine what it calls peace. Traore's story is one born of struggle. In 1988, in a small Burkina village, he entered a world of cracked earth, harsh sun, and hunger that seemed woven into daily life. His parents were subsistence farmers, clawing sustenance from soil that gave little. His mother's refrain, "The earth is our mother, treat her with respect and she will provide," became the bedrock of his outlook. Where others might have seen only scarcity, young Traore saw possibility. The army offered him a path to purpose. In a country where education was a privilege beyond the reach of many, the military gave him structure and the chance to serve. By his early 30s, he had earned a reputation for fairness and integrity. Yet as he rose through the ranks, he watched his nation unravel. Insurgent groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State terrorized the north and east. Millions were displaced, communities shattered, and governance seemed paralyzed. By 2022, Burkina Faso was bleeding, its government unable or unwilling to stop the violence or address the deeper wounds of poverty and corruption. It was in that chaos that Traore and a cadre of young officers acted. They staged a coup that stunned the international community. Western governments condemned it, the African Union suspended Burkina Faso, and critics dismissed him as another soldier bent on power. Yet when Traore spoke to his people for the first time as interim president, the world heard something unexpected. "We did not come to rule," he said. "We came to rebuild." It was not the voice of a conqueror, but of a man with a vision rooted in service. That vision took shape in ways few anticipated. Traore set about redefining peace not as the absence of conflict, but as the presence of dignity. He tackled the insurgency not with escalating violence, but through reconciliation. By 2025, more than 12,000 former fighters had laid down their weapons. Communities embraced them through dialogue, training, and resettlement programs. The Farmers of Peace initiative, launched earlier this year, pardoned over 1,000 militants and gave them land, seeds, and tools. Across villages, men once manning checkpoints now operated irrigation pumps. Terror attacks plummeted, and trust began to bloom where fear had long held sway. But Traore's audacity did not stop at reconciliation. In one sweeping move, he reclaimed millions of hectares of farmland from multinational corporations. For decades, foreign firms had siphoned wealth from Burkina Faso's fertile plains, while locals went hungry. In 2025, Traore's government nationalized those lands and handed them back to farmers. "The land is not for sale," he declared. "It belongs to those who work it." The impact was immediate. Markets overflowed with local produce, food insecurity eased, and farmers spoke of pride restored. It was not merely an economic reform, it was a reclamation of dignity and sovereignty. His initiatives expanded outward, transforming the Sahel into a laboratory for resilience. The Sahel Life Alliance, forged with Mali and Niger in 2025, sought to plant 800 million trees to halt desertification and revive ecosystems. It was hailed as one of the most ambitious climate projects of the decade, creating jobs and healing landscapes scarred by climate change. For the people of the Sahel, it was not just about trees, it was about survival, solidarity, and hope. Inside Burkina Faso, Traore restructured national priorities. He slashed bureaucratic spending and redirected funds to build thousands of schools and hundreds of healthcare centers. Classrooms sprouted in villages where children once studied under trees, and clinics opened in places where mothers had long prayed for their children's survival. By 2025, nearly every rural child had access to free school meals made from local crops, a policy that fed bodies, improved attendance, and strengthened local agriculture in a single stroke. Such sweeping changes brought him both admirers and skeptics abroad. In Paris, leaders offered measured respect, still uneasy with his coup-born government. In Washington, officials spoke cautiously of the need to rethink peace in the 21st century. Brazil praised him as the new Sankara, while Russia lauded his pragmatism. Yet it was the Vatican's intervention in 2025 that stunned the world. In a speech laden with spiritual gravity, the Pope spoke of seeing in Traore's leadership the true face of peace, not treaties and ceremonies, but toil, compassion, and service. For the first time in history, the Holy See formally endorsed a sitting African leader for the Nobel Peace Prize. At home, the announcement of his nomination in 2025 ignited celebrations unlike any Burkina Faso had seen in decades. In Ouagadougou, tens of thousands thronged the streets, chanting his name beneath lanterns, their voices rising in unity. Banners proclaimed, "We no longer beg, the world now listens." Across the Sahel, youth movements projected his speeches on walls, chanting, "One Sahel, one dream." In Lagos, Accra, Kinshasa, and Johannesburg, students held vigils and forums, inspired by a leader who planted seeds rather than chased speeches in Davos. On social media, number Nobel for Africa trended worldwide, a collective cry demanding recognition for homegrown leadership. Traore's nomination was not simply about one man. It was about a continent long defined by others, now asserting itself on its own terms. His rejection of IMF loans, his nationalization of farmland, his emphasis on local solutions all posed a direct challenge to the structures that had governed Africa's relationship with the world for decades. Yet his results were undeniable. Terror down, food production up, schools filled, hospitals functioning. Burkina Faso, once dismissed as fragile, was rewriting its story in 2025. As the Nobel Prize ceremony approaches later this year, the world watches closely. If Traore wins, he will be the first sitting African head of state to claim the honor, and the first military leader ever recognized for peace. But even if the medal slips into other hands, his impact has already been sealed. In villages across Burkina Faso, children eat, farmers harvest, and communities rebuild. In the Sahel, trees rise where only dust once blew. Across Africa, young people see in him a reminder that peace is not bestowed by foreign powers, but built, seed by seed, with one's own hands. In Ouagadougou, as drums echo through the night and chants of Ibrahim, Ibrahim roll through the streets, one truth becomes impossible to deny. In 2025, Traore has already won. He has won the trust of his people, the respect of his continent, and the attention of a world forced to reconsider what peace truly means. His story is no longer just a candidacy for a prize, it is a revolution of hope, a living answer to the question of our age. Peace is not the absence of war, but the presence of justice, dignity, and opportunity. And so, whether the Nobel Committee inscribes his name in its roll of honor or not, history has already made its choice. In 2025, in the fields of Burkina Faso and the hearts of its people, Ibrahim Traore has redefined peace.